Okay, welcome to my review of the BBC Model B versus the ZX Spectrum playing Elite. The BBC version, clearly the original, and the Spectrum version coming out a year later for owners of that computer. Now, on paper, the Spectrum seems to win rather dramatically with a faster processor, more RAM, and a more consistent screen resolution with more colours. But the 6502 chip in the BBC was a lot more efficient than the Z80, and as you can see on the screen, side-by-side comparison of the frame rates there gives the BBC quite a significant lead already. Although the BBC is flickering rather a lot. Question as to whether or not that was visible on the CRT monitors at the time, but it has been mentioned in a couple of reviews I've seen of the time. So Spectrum a little bit more stable, perhaps a little bit more readable. But the BBC definitely seeming to have the advantage. But look at those costs, 399 versus 129. This was David versus Goliath. So can the Spectrum version hold its own? So I'm booting up the BBC. This is the BeebM emulator. I'm having to run it in a slightly different mode. There seems to be a slight bug with the version I've got that doesn't work in classic BBC B mode. But anyway, it loads up. It's emulating the disk drives there with some quite natty sound effects. And there we go. That's it. Nice loading screen. Compare that with the Spectrum. Of course, no disk drives on the Spectrum. This is coming off a cassette, which is going to be a lot slower. The Spectrum actually had quite a fast disk loader by the standards of the day, of about 120 characters per second. But even at that speed, it took 20 minutes to load Elite, and I'm just going to subject you to the loading screen here, not the entire 20 minutes, because that would be pretty dull. But a 20-minute load time compared to a few seconds there, it really does give the BBC an edge with the disk drive version. And I think the welcome screen on the BBC with the planet and the rings is a little bit more interesting than this one. You can see I'm running 128K version here. That really doesn't make much difference, but it just gets rid of the lens lock, which was the copy protection. And there we go, the Spectrum version fired up. But as you can see, frame rate slightly disappointing. I don't remember it being that slow, but the BBC's got an edge there. So for the first round, just first impressions, I'm going to give the BBC 2 for fast loading and a decent experience as you come into the game. ZX Spectrum yet to score. So here's the BBC version again. Now what I'm going to do is take us on a flight to Leasty. Leasty is a safe system, so we can hopefully just get through without having too much problem with pirates. So I'm going to load up with 16 tons here of food, 4 tons of textiles. Go through this remarkable user interface. It just shows how much games have moved on. It's pretty unfriendly, to be honest, but there we go. The interesting thing about the BBC version here is you can see the two modes. We'll talk about that later on. There's the planet. We just need to navigate to Leasty, set the hyperspace destination. There we go, lock on, and it's 3.6 light years away. Back to the Spectrum version, let's do the same thing. Let's get out of the space station. Nice view of a Python there. Screen resolution is that little bit more on the Spectrum for the entirety of the screen, so it does make it a little bit easier to read, I think. Although that might be my bias of being a little bit more used to the Spectrum version. We'll run along. I'm just trying to find the right key. The key mapping is completely different between the two games, actually. The BBC has function keys, which the Spectrum didn't have. So the Spectrum buttons are moved all over the shop. Interesting enough, the prices here and the quantities for sale are different, which implies to me that the games weren't using quite the same algorithms to generate the trading mechanics. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. So ready to launch. Oh, I've gone to the wrong screen. Hang on, let's get out of this. Nope, I can't afford any of that. So where's the launch button? There we go. So now we're launching. And I prefer that launch effect. That feels to me like I'm leaving something rather than I'm just seeing a cut screen on the BBC version. So I'm going to give the Spectrum a point there for special effects of leaving the space station. Right, I quite like this view of the planet rotating, but it's a bit weird, to be honest, because it's rotating way too quickly here to be a realistic planet rotation, so I'm not quite sure what they're trying to achieve there. Maybe just a sort of 3D effect. There's the hyperspace tunnel. Again, that's a bit naff, to be honest. It doesn't look great. I like the fact that the planet over here now looks like the Death Star. So there's a bit of variety there. That's quite good. Back to the Spectrum version. Let's hyperspace here. definite sense of movement there. I like that. I think the hyperdrive special effect is again better, but we haven't got the planet animation, so again, not quite so sophisticated at that point. Let's move towards the planet. Let's see if we can get in range of the space station. We're going to use the jump drive, and I'm interested here that the BBC version just literally jumps towards the planet. There's no special effect at all, and the planet is quite crudely drawn around the edge there. You can see it's not actually a circle, it's a series of straight lines joined together, so obviously some optimization done there, probably for speed purposes. Comparing to the Spectrum version, the jump drive has a special effect. You can actually see us moving through space in a smoother fashion, so I think that is worth a point. The special effects there are a little bit better. So the Spectrum now clawing its way back, so we're two apiece. Now this is probably the most boring bit of the game, because you're mass locked now. You can't use the jump drive, and you're quite a long way away from the space station, so you just have to kind of sit here and wait. So while we're doing that, comment on the overall graphics. Now the BBC does have a higher resolution display here than the Spectrum, as we can see as we swap between the two, but the BBC was using a clever mode switching technique, so the top half of the screen was in higher res than the lower half, whereas the Spectrum has the same resolution throughout, and that to me is a clever trick. But the Spectrum version definitely looks cleaner and easier to read. Again, as we swap back to the other ones approaching the station, the console at the bottom of the BBC version is pretty cluttered because of the low resolution, although obviously it's got a nice use of colour, but I think I prefer the Spectrum version for readability. This one's also lacking the alert indicator, I noticed. That must have been something added for the Spectrum version. Top left of the scanner, there's nothing there on the BBC version. When we hop back to the Spectrum version, you'll see that there's an alert status indicator, which is green for the most part, and then it switches colour depending on what's happening in the game, which I think is quite a nice immersion indicator. What we can see here is we're coming up on the space station. We notice this is a dodecahedral station rather than the Coriolis type that we saw before. So there's a bit of variety on the BBC version in the different types of station that you see. In fact, there's two different types. Spectrum version, alas, only has the one. So the BBC's got a little bit more variety there, which is good. We like that. I'm just going to orientate myself towards the planet, which is the easiest way to line up for docking. We can see that sort of Death Starry effect that's still spinning around. I can't decide if I like that or not. It's clever, but it's almost a bit distracting. I'm just going to angle back towards the space station, and we can see that we're approximately lined up for docking, so let's hope my docking skills are up to it. Let's take the same run in on Spectrum. There you are, you can see that green sphere there, that's the alert indicator. That is not present on the BBC. I hadn't realised that was a Spectrum only edition. So there's an extra piece of functionality there that the BBC version doesn't have. And again, compare the console there with the BBC version. It's far less cluttered. It is easier to read the main gauges. Although the screen real estate, in terms of the bits that actually is the cockpit window, is quite a lot smaller. Oddly enough, it's more sort of familiar nowadays because it's more a sort of landscape view than it is a sort of square. But there we go. So as we're coming into the space station, this will be the normal Coriolis type. What's interesting here is I can already see the frame rate is beginning to suffer a bit as we call in. So the Z80A CPU here just is not as efficient as the 6502 in the BBC. It just doesn't have quite the same oomph, even though it's faster. So I think the Spectrum's going to suffer, particularly when we start getting more stuff on the screen. So as we're closing in, we can see the space station taking form. And oh, hang on a minute, we've got notice the alert indicator's turned yellow there because we detected another ship. I think it's a Python. Yeah, it's a Python just launched from the station. Now this is one thing that gives the Spectrum an edge again, is that there was quite a lot of traffic in the Spectrum version, particularly around the spaceports, that just didn't occur on the BBC as far as I've seen. I've hung around the spaceports a while to kind of watch it. Spectrum version felt busy when you were arriving at space stations, and it helped the immersion in the sense that there were lots of other ships doing their thing. You can actually follow those ships down to the planet station, and sometimes they turn around and come back and fly out towards the sun. So that does help a sense of you're playing in a universe where other things are going on. And in fact, there's another one. So it's obviously a busy time for the space station. So I'm going to give them a point apiece for that, because I like the stations on the BBC, and I like the immersion of lots of other ships on the Spectrum version. So still neck and neck. Right, back to the BBC. Let's see how my docking goes here, because this is the bit that terrified everybody. I've never docked the BBC version before, so I'm going to do my best with the techniques I learnt on the Spectrum version, which is kind of line up, get quite close in and correct the rotation at the last minute. So I hope this works, because this was always rather difficult. The manoeuvrability there of the BBC is not as high as the Spectrum. Doesn't turn quite so quick. It's accessing the disc, and a very quick but quite nice little landing screen there. I like that. That was good. That definitely didn't appear on the Spectrum version. So we sold it, and there we are. Look, I've made 46.4 credits. Woohoo! I can retire from this life of crime. Okay, Spectrum version. Just hoping to get in between the traffic. Notice here, as I come in, the Python will take evasive action when it gets too close to me, which again I think is quite a nice effect. So I just need to line up with the station here. In we go. And, blimey, a third Python has just emerged. Obviously some kind of celebration going on in Leasty today, and it's a Python fest of some kind. So again, that one's taking evasive action, getting out of my way, which is nice. Now the only problem here is occasionally a Python would materialise on the outside of the space station just as you were coming in, and that was instant death. So the Spectrum version really could have done with some traffic control. But there we go. I'm landing through a tunnel, and but I don't get a landing screen. I just get straight into the text interface. I sell my thing, and 46.8. So I made a tiny little bit more money on the Spectrum version, but not that you'd really notice. So good things there, but I think the BBC gets the edge there for the landing screen and the fact that the frame rate definitely didn't suffer as much. Although the Spectrum version was, to be fair, animating 4 or 5 things on that screen at that point rather than just the one of the BBC, but we'll see more of that later on. So the BBC's still ahead. So next I am going to take a trip to Ridquat. Now this is a anarchy planet which is packed full of pirates, and I'm going in there. I've just bought an extra missile, but I'm going in there with a badly equipped ship and nothing but a pulse laser, so the chances of me surviving are slim to none. I'm just going to go in there and see how long I can survive. The idea here being to compare the difficulty of the two games as I try and fly through one of the worst systems in the game. So there we go, I'm hyperspacing into Ridquat. And here I am in the most dangerous place, and I feel quite exposed now because I haven't played these games much for these 8-bit games for ages and ages, so my original skills will still be rusty. So let's launch out from the Spectrum version. Let's do exactly the same things. We've got the extra missile. Notice there I've got the alert indicator, so I can see that at all times. So even if I'm in the text screens and something happens, I get an immediate alert, which is again a nice little tactical touch for the Spectrum version. So let's line up with Ridquat. Back to the BBC version. I have something coming in. I've got at least one, looks like 2. Yep, I've got 2 fighters coming in. I'm getting under attack, most definitely. I can see my forward shields are going down, so I'm going to fight back. First thing to comment here, the sound effects are way better than the Spectrum version. The Spectrum is completely rubbish by comparison. The BBC, of course, does have a sound chip in it. So let's lock on. This looks like a crate. I'm going to take it out. It's time to tuck in behind it and give it a blast. Spiraling, it's not really doing much in the way of evasive manoeuvres here. It's just sort of spinning around. So, and that was surprisingly easy, to be honest. I think that took about 6 solid hits and it's gone, and given that I've only got a pulse laser and 97 credits, he must have been a bad boy. Wow, that's a good bounty. Anyway, here we come, two more crates, and I must admit, my I can feel my adrenaline up here a bit. This is actually good fun. I'm enjoying this. There's a definite sense of immersion here in the battle. Let's see if we can take these guys down. Again, not really dodging very much, flying in a straight line. Spinning around the centre axis is not really the way. I mean, I'd be hitting it a lot faster if I had a joystick. I'm playing this on keyboard, so that makes it a little bit difficult to control. But I can see some other ships are coming in already, so I'm definitely attracting some attention here. Come on, there we go, he's down. Let's go get the other one. Quite like that explosion. I'm not sure if that's a vector graphic or whether that's just some sort of animated sprite. 107 credits. I really think that the BBC version is being very generous on its bounties here. I don't remember getting anything like that on the Spectrum. And again, that was a very easy takedown. Right, same place on the Spectrum. We've got an incoming ship, just a single one at the moment. Yes, apologies for the sound effects. They are naff. And noticing here, again, the frame rate is surprisingly low. I don't remember it being this low, but it is definitely not as fast as the BBC. Let's see, this looks like a Cobra. And, oh, it's launched a missile, which I've shot down. And another one. Oh, yes. How about that for skills? 2 missiles shot down. I think he's going to be embarrassed. Of course, I haven't got an ECM at the moment, which I could have fitted. But the Spectrum version at least has tried to fight back. Oh, that guy's dead. So again, that was quite an easy takedown. Although I hit him quite a few times on the way in. Moving closer to Ridquat. Got another lone attacker at the moment. I remember the Spectrum version throwing more attackers at me when I was playing it, so we'll give it a bit of more chance. Looks like another lone ship. I would guess this is a Python this time. It's coming in. I'm going to launch a missile. Off it goes. Missiles on the Spectrum were generally absolutely rubbish. They hardly ever hit anything, so we'll see if we have any more luck with this one. It's going in. Go on, go on, go on. Ah. Useless. That's a Falcon de Lacy missile, by the way. I hope they've improved them in the years between now and Elite Dangerous, because they were rubbish back in the day. It could never hit anything. So I'm hitting this quite hard, and it's got past me. Quite a tough ship, actually, in terms of its shielding, but it's not very manoeuvrable, the Python, so I should be able to tuck in behind it. There's my missile still flying around. And yeah, noticeable frame rate lag now. It's not... definitely not as fast and as visceral as the BBC version in terms of the combat, but the ship is dodging around. I am having to move it, and it's, as you can see, I'm hitting it and hitting it and hitting it, and it still hasn't died. So I'm going to give the Spectrum a little bit of a... Oh, my missile worked! And there we go, only 20 credits. Now, given the missile cost me 30, that's not a great deal. So I'd say the BBC version on balance here so far is quite a bit easier than the Spectrum version. So I'm going to give the BBC points for the more visceral combat, but I'm going to give the Spectrum version points for being tougher. Let's up the ante. I'm a bit further in, and I've now got about 4 ships attacking here on the BBC version. This one looks like a Cobra. Graphics are interfering with each other as they're trying to be drawn there. It's not quite so sharp as the Spectrum version. Oh, finally launched a missile at me. I still don't think the AI on the BBC is as good. The ships are not dodging. They are spinning, but they're not really turning and avoiding me. I think if I was playing this on the joystick, I would have quite an easy time of it. The keyboard is making it quite hard to get it. See, again, not many hits to take that out. Nice explosion though, I like that. So the ships seem to be very poorly shielded, considering I've only got a pulse laser on this thing. I think if I had a military laser, I'd be cutting through them like butter. I'm still in trouble though. I'm on my last energy bank. And I'm still being besieged by ships, and the scanner is now getting quite cluttered. It's quite hard to read. This looks like another Cobra, maybe? More. No, it's a Sidewinder. Now I'm going to imaginate here that is in fact an orange Sidewinder with a laser radio crew aboard, and I'm going to therefore take them down in true Senator Drew style. So let's see if we can take out this Sidewinder. Pesky annoying with a bunch of second technicians and repairmen aboard. And straight my gun. Excellent, there we go. One Sidewinder bites the dust. Revenge. Anyway, I'm still in trouble here. Let's see if I can get this guy in front of me. I think that stuff behind me is debris, so I'm hoping I'll be okay. Oh, no, it's not debris. That's definitely... I'm dead. Right, back to the Spectrum version. Will I fare any better? Now, this is what I remember the Spectrum. You get bracketed by ships on the quarters in the front and the one behind. So I've got ships coming in from 3 vectors here trying to bracket me. Now my tactics on the Spectrum when I played it was to get the lone one first, which is what I'm going to try and do. And hopefully get in before the other 3 that are out there can actually lock onto. Actually, there's 4 other ships. So I've got 5 opponents on me at the moment, which is quite a lot. That's another Sidewinder. This is actually not good. The Sidewinder on the Spectrum version was a lot faster and more manoeuvrable than the Cobra, so I'm going to probably struggle to get this guy. And as you can see, he is turning and trying to evade me. So let's see if I can pull him behind. I'm going to have to cut the speed to up the turning radius. So I'm hitting him, but he is dodging. I'm having to move left and right, and he's launching a missile, which is great because I don't have an ECM, and because it's not head-on, my chances of shooting that missile down now are minimal. And there he goes, he's dodging away again. So I'm really definitely more impressed with the AI on the Spectrum version, but not the frame rate. As you can see, it is now beginning to struggle. But there are 5 other ships out there, so we've got to give it its due. It is trying hard with this. But the combat is tougher, but I wouldn't say it was quite so exciting. The BBC version definitely has the edge with that. I think that's a mark. Oh, I'm down to my 3rd energy unit already. Clearly my elite rating is a bit rusty. I've got no shield, but oh, and that's it. I think I hit something there. So, game over. Well, based on that, I'm going to give the BBC some points and the Spectrum some points. I think the AI is better on the Spectrum, but the experience there is definitely in the BBC's favour. Now, just a quick note: this is the review from Crash. One thing to point out is that the Spectrum version had 5 missions, whereas the BBC only had 2. So, given that kind of playability, I'm going to give the Spectrum an extra point right at the end of this review, but it isn't quite enough. The BBC version is definitely more fun, and I say that as a die-hard Spectrum owner. I have to give the BBC the win, but what I will say is that the Spectrum version has better immersion, cleverer AI, graphics quality in general is higher, and those missions are really, really good, but the BBC wins with its frame rate, sound, the stations, and I rather like those explosions. It's a better game overall in terms of fun, but the Spectrum version, considering the machine was a third of the price, is a very, very worthy close second. So there we go. BBC takes the win. Spectrum, sorry guys, but it tried hard, but at the end of the day, not quite as much fun. But they're all great. That is it. Thank you very much, everyone, and ride on, Commanders.